Darian Cole ran through the streets of the city, his heart pounding like a drum. Smoke and fire filled the sky, painting everything in red and black. Buildings that once touched the clouds now lay broken, shattered, and burned. He could hear the distant screams of people, the roar of creatures that were not of this world, and the heavy footsteps of monsters that crushed anything in their path. Humanity was losing fast. He had watched it all begin hours ago. The sky had split open with a blinding light, and from it fell the alien beasts. They were enormous, taller than the tallest buildings, with thick armored scales that glinted in the sunlight. Their claws were sharp enough to tear through steel, and their mouths were full of rows of jagged teeth. They moved with terrifying speed, their growls echoing through the streets like thunder. People ran in panic, cars crashed into one another, and sirens wailed. Darian had been part of the city's defense force, but their weapons were useless. Bullets bounced off the beast's scales, explosives only made them angrier, and even tanks were crushed beneath their massive feet. The army tried, but one by one they fell. The human soldiers retreated or disappeared under the onslaught. Darian did not stop running. He ducked under a fallen beam and rolled past a group of survivors trying to climb over rubble. A woman screamed as a beast swiped at her with a claw, but she managed to scramble to safety. Darian grabbed her arm and pulled her along. "Keep moving," he shouted. "Don't look back." They reached a narrow alley and Darian stopped for a moment to catch his breath. The woman, panting and shaking, stared at him with wide eyes. "They're everywhere, nothing can stop them," she whispered. Darian looked at the alley and then at the skyline, where the largest beast yet had appeared. It moved with a terrifying grace, crushing cars and streetlights without effort. Even from a distance, Darian could see the way its armor plates reflected the sun like molten metal. "I don't know if anyone can stop them," Darian said quietly, almost to himself. But then his eyes hardened. He would not give up. Humans had survived wars, disasters, and plagues. They could survive this too, if someone fought, if someone led, if someone refused to give up. That someone could be him. He pulled the woman forward and ran again. They passed a ruined store, shelves overturned, and items scattered across the floor. A child cried inside, trapped under a fallen beam. Darian didn't hesitate. He lifted the heavy wood with all his strength and carried the child to safety. The woman grabbed the boy and held him close, tears streaming down her face. As they moved, Darian noticed other survivors, small groups of people huddled together in fear. He waved at them, signaling that they should come. Some hesitated, but many joined. Soon, Darian had gathered a small band of humans, scared but willing to follow someone who seemed to know what to do. The roar of the largest beast drew nearer. Its shadow fell over them and for a moment the humans froze. Darian turned to them. "Listen," he said, keeping his voice steady. "We can't fight them like this. Guns won't work, bombs won't work. But we can survive if we stay smart, if we stick together, and if we find a way to fight back." The humans looked at him, hope and fear mixing in their eyes. Darian took a deep breath. He needed a plan and he needed it fast. The city was falling apart, the army was gone, and the beasts were hunting. If they stayed in the open they would be next. He led the group toward an old subway station, hoping the tunnels below could offer safety. The entrance was partially blocked by rubble, but Darian pushed aside what he could. They descended into the darkness, the sounds of destruction above echoing like distant storms. In the dim light, he could see the faces of those he led, determined, scared, but still alive. "Down here we can rest, gather supplies and plan," Darian whispered. "We have to survive tonight. And if we survive, we fight back tomorrow." The group nodded, some murmuring agreements, others still too shocked to speak. Darian knew it would not be easy. The beasts were relentless, stronger, and smarter than anything humans had faced before. But he also knew something the aliens did not. Humans never gave up. Even in the darkest hour, they could rise. Darian stood at the edge of the tunnel, looking back toward the ruined city. Flames burned in the distance, smoke curling into the sky. He clenched his fists. Humanity had fallen, yes. But it was not over. Not yet. Not while he was still alive. And in that moment, for the first time since the attack began, Darian allowed himself a small spark of hope. Darian led the small group of survivors through the dark subway tunnels, their footsteps echoing against the cold walls. The air was heavy with dust and smoke from the city above. The roar of alien beasts still shook the ground, reminding them that danger was never far away. But down here, in the shadowed tunnels, humans had a chance, a small, fragile chance, to survive. He found a wider chamber once used as a storage area for old trains, and motioned for everyone to sit. The group was exhausted, dirty and terrified, but their eyes followed Darien with trust. Even in the worst moments, people needed someone to believe in. And Darien had decided that he would be that someone. "We can't stay quiet forever," Darien said, his voice firm. "The aliens are everywhere above. They will not stop. But down here we can make a plan. We can prepare. We can fight back." One man, older, with a gray beard and hollow eyes, shook his head. "Fight back? You don't understand. They are monsters. Nothing we have can touch them. We are weak. We are finished." Darien looked at him calmly. "Maybe we are weak if we try the same way as before. But we are smart. Humans are clever. We can outthink them, set traps and hit them where it hurts. That is how we survive." He moved to a corner of the chamber where broken tools and old electronics lay scattered. With quick hands he began sorting them. "Look, I know these are not weapons like the army has. Guns won't stop the beast. Bombs won't either. But we can make new tools. Things they won't expect." He held up a small device, wire sticking out. "This is a pulse emitter. It can disrupt their senses if used right. It won't kill them, but it can confuse them. We can use traps, lures, and our brains. The beasts may be strong, but humans have something they don't: strategy." A younger man, barely 20, looked at Darien with wide eyes. "You really think we can fight them? Not just hide?" "Yes," Darien said firmly. "We have to fight or we die anyway. But we fight smart. We survive first. Then we hit back. One step at a time." The group spent the night cleaning, sorting, and making plans. Darien taught them how to use the pulse emitters and how to set traps in narrow corridors. He showed them how to use their environment, the fallen beams, broken walls, even abandoned vehicles, to their advantage. Every little detail counted. Every human could make a difference. As they worked, Darien watched them closely. He saw fear in their eyes, but also determination. Some were trembling as they touched the pulse devices, others whispered prayers. But all of them stayed. They trusted him, and that trust was more powerful than any weapon. By morning they had a small defensive line set up inside the tunnels. Darien had marked choke points, escape routes, and even hidden areas where they could hide if needed. It was not much, but it was something, a line between life and death. Then a sound came from above. A low, heavy growl vibrating through the walls. The group froze. Darien's heart raced, but he kept his voice calm. "It's one of them," he said. "Stay quiet. Follow my lead." The ground shook as the beast moved closer. Dust fell from the ceiling. Its claws scraped metal and stone, testing the tunnels. Darien signaled the group to prepare. Pulse devices ready, traps armed. The alien creature entered a lower tunnel, massive and menacing. Its glowing eyes searched for prey. Darien took a deep breath and threw a small device toward the wall. It activated with a bright pulse of light. The beast froze for a moment, confused, its roar echoing in the chamber. "Now!" Darien shouted. The humans sprung their traps. Wires snapped, beams fell, and the beast stumbled. It tried to roar again, but Darien's pulse devices disoriented it. Sparks flew from exposed circuits. The humans watched, holding their breath, but following every command Darien gave. Finally, the beast, frustrated and confused, turned back and left, stumbling into a side tunnel. The survivors collapsed in relief. Some laughed, some cried, and some simply sat in silence, amazed that they had survived. Darien looked at them, exhausted but proud. "We did it," he said. "This is only the first step. The beasts are strong, yes, but we are stronger in ways they cannot understand. As long as we have courage, brains, and each other, we can survive, and maybe even win." The group nodded. Fear was still in their eyes, but so was hope. They had learned that they could fight back even if it was just a little. They had learned that humans were not helpless. Darien took a moment to look at each of them, silently promising that he would not let them die. He knew the road ahead would be harder and more dangerous, but he also knew that humans never give up. Not really. Not when there is still a chance. And in the dark tunnels, far from the ruined city above, a spark of determination burned brighter than any flame. Humanity still had a chance. Darien led the group out of the subway tunnels at dawn. The city above was silent, the smoke still rising from burned buildings. For a moment, it seemed as if the world itself held its breath. The alien beasts were still out there, prowling, waiting for the next human to make a mistake. But today Darien had a plan. They moved carefully through the streets, sticking to shadows and broken alleyways. Darien checked every corner, every doorway, every ruined car, teaching the others to do the same. "We are not running blindly," he said. "We are hunters too. They think we are weak. We will show them we are clever. The group arrived at a plaza where one of the smaller alien beasts had been seen earlier. It was massive, with scales that gleamed like steel, and claws that could crush a car in one swipe. Darian studied it carefully. He noticed that when the creature swung its claws, it slowed slightly, and its glowing eyes scanned for movement constantly. "This is our chance," he whispered. "If we are smart, we can hit it without being killed. We only need to survive and make it hurt them. That is how we win." He instructed the humans to spread out. Some would distract the beast, making noise and moving in patterns to confuse it. Others would hide behind rubble, ready to activate the pulse devices. Darian himself carried the heaviest device, the one that could cause the most disruption to the creature's senses. The moment came. The beast roared, a deep sound that shook the ground, and charged toward the humans. Two of them darted out, waving scraps of metal and shouting, drawing its attention. The beast swung its massive claws but missed by inches. Sparks flew where metal scraped concrete, and the humans ducked and rolled, staying just out of reach. Darian waited, timing everything perfectly. When the beast turned, he threw the pulse device directly at its chest. A burst of energy spread across the creature, making it stagger. Its glowing eyes flickered, confusion and pain crossing its massive face. Darian saw the opportunity. He ran forward, jumping onto a fallen wall that gave him leverage, and plunged the device deeper into the beast's armor near a joint. The creature roared, thrashing violently, but Darian held firm. Others activated their traps. Nets fell from above, beams tipped over, and sparks flew from exposed wires. The beast struggled, blinded by the pulses, and finally stumbled to the ground with a heavy crash. The humans stared, breathing hard, as the creature lay motionless. Darian dropped to the ground beside it, chest heaving. "We did it," he said quietly. "One down. That is how we fight them. One at a time, smart and careful." For the first time in weeks, hope filled their hearts. The humans realized that they could survive, that they could win. They were not helpless. Not anymore. Darian turned to them. "Listen," he said, "this is only the beginning. They are strong, yes, but every beast has a weakness. Every move we make can turn the tide. If we stay smart, if we work together, we can fight back. And one day we will make them regret coming here." The group nodded, their eyes shining with determination. Even the older man who had doubted them before now stood taller, holding a pulse device like a weapon of hope. The younger man smiled for the first time in days, ready to face the dangers ahead. They spent the rest of the day setting up defenses in case the creature was not alone. Darian showed them how to use debris, narrow streets, and abandoned vehicles to their advantage. Every corner could be a trap, every shadow a shield. The humans learned quickly, following his example, understanding that survival depended on both courage and brains. As night fell, they gathered in a partially destroyed building, watching the city around them. Fires burned, smoke rose, and distant roars reminded them of the threat that still lingered. But they felt something they had not felt in a long time: confidence. Humans were not just prey. They could fight, they could survive, and they could win. Darian sat quietly, thinking about what they had accomplished. One small victory might not change the world, but it changed something important: belief. Belief that humans could stand against monsters, belief that they were not finished, belief that one person could make a difference. He looked at each of the survivors and saw hope, courage, and determination reflected in their eyes. "We have made the first step," he said softly. "And the next step will be even harder. But if we keep learning, keep fighting, and never give up, humanity will survive." The night was quiet except for the distant roars and the crackling of small fires. Darian knew more beasts would come, bigger and stronger. But he also knew this: humans are clever, persistent, and brave. And as long as he lived, as long as they lived, they would keep fighting. One beast at a time, one step at a time. Somewhere deep inside him, a spark burned brighter than any fear. The spark of hope, the spark of determination, the spark of humanity. And in that moment, Darian understood something he had always known. Monsters may be powerful, but humans are unstoppable when they refuse to give up. The city lay in ruins. Smoke rose in thick black clouds, and fires burned in buildings that had survived the first wave of destruction. The streets were littered with rubble, twisted metal, and the remains of vehicles that had been crushed by the alien beasts. The sky above was dark with the silhouettes of creatures circling, hunting for any sign of life. Darian Cole stood at the edge of the ruined plaza, looking up at the largest alien beast he had ever seen. It was massive, taller than the tallest buildings, and its scales glowed faintly in the fading light like molten rock. Around it, smaller beasts prowled, guarding their queen. This was the final confrontation. Humanity's survival rested on this moment. Darien turned to the small band of humans behind him. They were armed with pulse devices, traps, and whatever scraps of technology they could find. Their faces were smeared with dirt and sweat, but there was determination in their eyes. Fear was there too, but it was mixed with hope. Darien knew that humans could do impossible things when they refused to give up. "Remember," he said, voice firm, "we don't have to kill them all. We only have to survive and strike at their weak points. Work together, follow the plan, and stay smart. One mistake and it's over." They moved carefully, using the ruins as cover. Darien led the way, scouting for vulnerable points in the beast's formation. The queen moved slowly but deliberately, each step shaking the ground. The smaller beasts flanked her, ready to attack anything that came near. Darien studied her movements. He had seen patterns in their attacks, ways to exploit their strength against them. He signaled to the humans to take their positions. Some would distract the smaller beasts, while he targeted the queen with the heaviest pulse device. Others were ready with nets and wires to slow her down. Every move was calculated. Every second counted. The moment came. Darien activated a device that sent a bright pulse into the queen's chest. She froze, confused and disoriented. Sparks flew from the device and the glow in her scales flickered. The smaller beasts roared and tried to attack, but the humans' traps slowed them, giving Darien a chance to move closer. He climbed over a fallen wall and jumped onto the queen's back, careful to avoid her claws. The pulse device in his hands sizzled and sparked. He plunged it into a vulnerable joint beneath her armor. The queen roared, thrashing violently, but Darien held on, using every ounce of his strength. The smaller beasts tried to help her, but the humans were ready. Nets fell, wires snapped, and pulse devices created bursts of confusion. The creatures stumbled, giving Darien the opening he needed. He focused all his energy on the queen, moving the device to her central neural point. Sparks exploded, and she let out a deafening roar that shook the city. Then silence. The queen collapsed, massive and defeated, her glow fading. The smaller beasts scattered, confused and leaderless. Darien fell to the ground, exhausted but alive. Around him, the humans cheered softly, tears in their eyes. They had done it. They had survived. They had won. Darien looked at the survivors, his chest heaving. "We did it," he said. "We survived. We fought back. And this is only the beginning. Humanity can never be defeated if we refuse to give up." The group gathered around him, holding each other, sharing relief and joy. They knew the battle was not completely over. Other beasts might come, but they also knew that humans had something no alien could ever have: courage, determination, and the ability to think, to adapt, to overcome. Darien stood and looked at the ruined city. Flames still burned and smoke rose into the dark sky, but he saw something else too: hope. Humans would rebuild. They would fight for their homes, their families, their future. And they would never forget what they had learned, that even in the darkest hour, one human could make a difference. He walked through the streets, checking on survivors and helping wherever he could. Children clung to their parents, the wounded were tended to, and those too scared to move found comfort in the presence of someone who had led them to victory. Darien felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but he also felt pride. Humans had faced impossible odds, and survived. As night fell, the city was quiet, except for the distant crackle of fires and the occasional low growl of beasts in the distance. Darien sat on a broken wall, looking at the stars above. For a moment he allowed himself to breathe. They had fought, they had won, and humanity was still here. Somewhere deep inside him, a spark burned brighter than fear, the spark of hope, courage, and human determination. The alien beasts were strong, but humans were stronger. Stronger because they never gave up, stronger because they fought for something greater than themselves. And Darien knew without a doubt that humanity would survive. Not because of machines, not because of weapons, but because humans never, ever quit. The sun rose slowly over the ruined city, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. Smoke still curled from shattered buildings, but the roar of the alien beasts had faded. For the first time in weeks, humanity could breathe. The battle was over. Darien Cole walked carefully through the streets, helping survivors out of the rubble. Children clung to their parents, eyes wide with fear and wonder. The wounded were tended to, some with makeshift bandages, others carried to safer areas. Humans were alive. They had survived when the world had seemed lost. Darien paused at the edge of the plaza, looking at the bodies of the fallen alien beasts. The queen lay in the center, massive and defeated, her glowing scales now dull and lifeless. Smaller beasts had fled or been captured by the humans' traps. It was a sight that no one had thought they would see, humanity standing victorious against creatures from another world. He turned to the group of survivors who had followed him through every danger. There was the older man with the gray beard, who now smiled for the first time since the invasion began. The younger man who had doubted they could fight at all, stood tall, holding a pulse device like a badge of honor. Others, some barely more than children, looked at Darien with admiration and hope. "We did it," Darien said quietly but with strength in his voice. "We survived. Not because we were stronger, not because we had better weapons. But because we never gave up. Because we thought, we fought, and we stayed together. That is what makes us human. That is why we survive." The survivors nodded. Their fear was still there, but it was now mixed with pride. They had seen what one person could do. They had followed Darien's courage and wisdom, and together they had changed the fate of humanity. Darien walked through the city, noticing the small signs of life returning. A plant growing through a crack in the concrete, a bird perched on a ruined streetlight, a child laughing quietly while rebuilding a broken toy. Humanity had been battered, but it was not broken. Humans were still here and they would rise again. He came to a hill overlooking the city, where he could see the full extent of the destruction. Buildings were collapsed, streets were cracked, fires still burned, but survivors moved through the ruins, helping each other, salvaging what they could and planning for the future. Humanity was alive, and it was learning to be stronger than before. Darien knelt and picked up a small piece of alien metal, curved and strange but no longer dangerous. He studied it carefully. This metal could be used, adapted, and studied. Humanity would learn from the enemy. They would take what they needed to rebuild and to protect themselves. Humans were clever, resourceful, and determined. No alien threat could change that. He looked back at the survivors behind him. "Listen," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "The battle may be over, but our fight is not done. We will rebuild. We will grow stronger. And one day we will be ready if they come back. But remember this, today we won because we refused to give up. Because even in the darkest hour we found courage. Because we are human." A cheer rose from the survivors, loud and proud. It was not just a cry of victory, it was a declaration. Humanity was still here. Humanity would survive. And they had one man to thank for leading them through the darkest night, Darien Cole. As the day went on, people began to rebuild. Temporary shelters were set up, fires were controlled, and food and water were gathered. The survivors worked together, helping each other, inspired by the example of bravery and leadership they had seen. Humanity had been tested and it had passed. Stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. Darien walked among them, helping where he could, giving advice, teaching what he had learned. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult. The city was in ruins and the threat of more alien attacks might return. But he also knew something very important. Humans never stop. They never quit. And as long as people like him and the survivors continued to fight, humanity would endure. He climbed to the top of a building, looking at the horizon. The sky was clearing and the sun shone through the smoke. Birds were beginning to return, small signs that life was returning. And in that moment, Darien allowed himself a quiet smile. Humanity had fallen, yes, but it had risen again. Stronger, braver, and more alive than ever before. And far away in the distance, a few faint roars could be heard. But Darien did not fear them. Humanity had faced monsters from another world and had won. Humans were clever, brave, and unstoppable when they refused to give up. The alien beasts had learned the hard way that they could never take the human spirit. Darien stood tall, letting the sun warm his face. Around him, survivors worked, laughed, and began to rebuild. Humanity's triumph was not just in defeating the beasts. It was in proving that humans, no matter how small or weak they may seem, could survive, adapt, and rise again. And in that moment, Darien knew something deep inside. The future belonged to humanity because humans never give up, never surrender, and never stop fighting.